Welcome to Driving Participation with Beth Brodowski, a podcast for sharing great ideas that get people involved and active in organizations. Join us to learn what marketers and fundraisers around the country are doing to get people to show up, stick around, and give back.
Hello and welcome to Driving Participation. This is Beth Brodowski, and I'm here today with Kate Coleman. Kate is the Executive Vice President, Chief Strategy and Advancement Officer of the YMCA. And I learned about a rebranding project that the YMCA undertook a couple of years ago. And so this is a wonderful opportunity for me to continue to explore some of the topics that we've been talking about as far as how branding rolls out after the branding process. So Kate, thank you so much for joining me today.
It is my pleasure, Beth. Thank you for including me.
So it's got to be really interesting to be part of a national organization, but people don't usually start out that way. I am curious, how did you wander into this work of nonprofit communications?
So let's see, how I wandered in. The answer is circuitously. I actually began my career in finance, and I was in the private sector. I did M&A, I did consulting, and then someone gave me what was clearly the biggest break of my career, and I was asked to come and run all of the revenue-generating operations of a company that was in the electronic funds transfer business. Sounds kind of crazy. But that included marketing and sales. And that organization, we were absolutely brand fanatics. And so that was my real introduction to marketing and branding. And in that situation, I actually experienced the power of brand in terms of its tangible impact on equity, because that was a privately held firm, and we sold it and we got a great multiple, and that's because of the brand equity that we had created over time. So that was sort of the accidental part. The very deliberate part was, after we sold that company, I made a decision that I wanted to work in the nonprofit sector because I felt it was time for me to give back. And so I came into the Y, and in that instance ran marketing and communications. And so I had started down that marketing track.
I love how you describe that as brand equity as a multiplier. And I think this is going to be such a valuable conversation, because one of the things I've been asked a lot lately is, why does brand matter for a nonprofit when, they're in the business of doing their work, generating their funds, and getting people to participate and get involved to help them do that? How have you found participation to be aligned with and connected to this branding concept that you're working with?
So let me back up first, if I could, and answer the question of why brand matters in the not-for-profit sector. And I'm going to get a little bit ahead of sort of what I would anticipate you're going to ask me about why we rebranded. My belief is that in the nonprofit sector, branding can be both profound and transformational. It sets a true north for the organization. It clarifies what is and isn't in mission. And I think sometimes in our sector we can get distracted. And so brand helps create focus. Other thing that I think it does, and this gets more to your participation question, is people don't always understand what an organization is about, and brand creates that framework for articulating the essence of the organization, and people need to understand that if they're going to participate with the organization.
That is such a great and clear way to explain it. I really just want you to walk around with me all the time.
You are kind.
Because it's so funny, because typically, communicating why branding is important at a nonprofit, it seems like it can be really hard. People tend to think of branding as something that helps you sell jeans and soda. So I'm curious what your perspective is on, what's different in an organizational branding process versus a for-profit, either in the process or in the impact or the results of it, because you've now been involved in two national or large scope organizations and have gone through did you go through a branding process with the payment?
No, not with the first one. We had already been, and honestly that was before brand kind of was
a thing,
had the cachet it does today.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, we were absolutely fanatic about hoeing or keeping to the essence of our organization. But I'm not sure, Beth, that I would distinguish brand as being different when it's done well in the for-profit sector or in the not-for-profit sector. Because while we may think in the for-profit sector, we may think about it as a vehicle for selling widgets, to me, it's the vehicle for identifying or defining the essence of the organization. We say here how we think, act, and communicate. And to me, if you look at some of the best brands in the for-profit sector, the essence of their brand shapes their strategy, shapes their messaging, shapes everything, how they interact with their customers. So I'm not sure that I think of them as differently. I just think we underestimate its power in our sector because we look at a simplistic definition of it in the private sector. Did that make sense to you?
Oh, absolutely. It makes sense to me. And I completely agree. It's just, I think it's so valuable to hear somebody who has worked in a brand focused way on both sides to be able to say that, because you've lived it, you've done it, you've executed it. So you've seen how powerful it is, and it's not really sector dependent.
That's right. I think that's exactly right.
So have you seen the branding, is the branding process different? Do nonprofits typically go about it differently?
Well, so I'm going to apologize. I don't know the answer to that because I haven't done a rebranding in the for-profit sector.
That's true, right.
But my sense would be that the answer should be no, because there are certain fundamentals that one needs to understand to develop one's brand platform. So you need to understand what are the sort of essence, what is the essence, what are the strengths of the organization. You need to understand the world within which you are operating. You need to understand how your audiences hear you, how they translate what you say or how you show up into their own language. And it's the intersection of those things that kind of create the essence of the brand. So that, I think, would happen irrespective of sector.
Right, yeah. I really, really think it would too. And the YMCA decided that they would take on this process. So can you talk a little bit specifically about what was going on at the YMCA that made them think that this investment, this transition would ultimately be valuable for them?
So I happen to love this part of the story, Beth, because the reality is, when I would like to say to you, we knew we needed to rebrand, and we were right. No, we did not. We were going to develop a positioning strategy to share with the world, and I'm practically quoting, how the Y addressed critical social issues in this country. So that's where we started. We were going to do a positioning campaign. So we engaged a firm to help us, and that firm began to do some research. And that research said that the YMCA presented itself in such a fragmented fashion to the world. Hundreds of logos, hundreds of different messages, hundreds of different program names. I mean, as fragmented as one could. We have some very fun sort of visuals of the number of logos. So that was one thing we determined. Then the next thing that we determined, and we did do some fairly sophisticated research here, is that we determined that our organization underperformed both its peers, both our peers and our potential with respect to donations of time and money. And so we took those things together, and they said to us, all right, you can do a positioning campaign, and that will create even more confusion at worst, and at best it'll do nothing. So that didn't seem like a really good investment of our resources. So we stepped back and said, really what we need to do as an organization is get ourselves on the same page and do a better understanding, a job of helping people understand who we are. And so that's how we came to the decision to do what we call this brand revitalization.
Now, I would bet that a lot of people that are listening would maybe have heard the word positioning before, and they've heard the word branding before. I'm not sure that people necessarily know either what the differences are, or when you were going about that process, what were you thinking as the difference between a positioning campaign and the rebranding in the way that you ultimately did it?
Yeah, fair enough. Definitely call me on the lingo.
I always try and think about, like, who's listening, and are they going to be like, wait a minute, what?
So I'm gonna give you the definitions that were in operation at that time. So these may not be everybody's definition, but from our perspective, a positioning campaign was going to have some sort of a slogan and a set of messages that we were going to try to pitch with the press, with influential people around the country, to help them understand that we were addressing critical social issues. Branding, on the other hand, was really about defining who we are as an organization. What is the core thing that we're all about? And for us, we articulate that as our cause. In the for-profit sector, you'll hear people call it their brand promise, right? But for us, it's our cause, and the whole reason we exist is to strengthen community. And we do that through three areas: youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility. So that thing, strengthening community, became our brand promise. And those three things that I said, youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility, were our areas of focus. All of a sudden, that defined what we wanted to see happen and the domains through which we tried to make those changes.
Wow.
Do you see? So where positioning is just sort of a set of messages that you're pushing out, this was, who are we, what are we trying to do, and how are we trying to do it?
And it also sounds like when you started going about it, it was a set of messages that you decided internally was important that you were going to push out. And what you ultimately discovered was that you needed to look outside your walls into your community and find out what they needed from you.
Yes, or how we could articulate. So it wasn't that we changed what we did.
Right.
We reframed what we did in language that resonated or that came from external sources. So you're exactly right. One was internal driven. This is the message we want to push out. The second was, what is it that we're all about, but articulated in ways that people could understand and respond to.
And that is a huge point that you just made. You didn't change what you did. A lot of times rebranding, people think that means wiping the slate clean and starting from scratch. And it's rarely that. And sometimes it doesn't even at the end, sometimes there's not even a change of some of the things that people often think of when they think of rebranding, like, for example, a logo design. That's not always even part of it.
So honestly, when we started out on this journey, we had no intention of changing our logo. We had no intention of changing our whole visual system. But what happened was when we had this rearticulation of what we're about, when we defined our cause and our areas of focus, we actually looked at that old logo and said, this logo doesn't represent what we want people to feel or we hope people will feel about us. And in addition to the brand promise, and now please stop me, Beth, if I'm throwing too much lingo in.
Don't worry, I will.
Our values and our voice attributes, kind of our personality. Mm-hmm. And when we looked at those things, and those things came from a deep understanding of our own organization, our personality. When we looked at those things, our old logo didn't actually fit it, didn't communicate it visually. And so what we did was we actually designed multiple different logos that we believed were emblematic of the cause or the essence of the organization that we were trying to communicate. And we tested those logos with consumers, believe it or not, mm-hmm. and chose the one that consumers felt best conveyed the things that we wanted people to understand or feel about us. And then if I could just go on for 1 mm-hmm. minute more, with respect to our visual system, meaning everything, the layout of the page, where things go, the fonts, all that jazz, what we had learned from the research was that people don't understand the impact that we make. And so what we did was, in addition to the new logo, we created what's called a message-driven visual system, so that there's a big benefit statement in the middle of virtually everything that you will see printed by us. And that benefit statement was meant to help people understand what the impact is that the Y makes. So those were very deliberate decisions, and others that I could talk about to the extent you were interested.
So I want to ask you a little bit about the research. And I know this was a long and complex process. So obviously you can't go through, here's everything that we did. But I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about what was the most impactful research? Was there one type of research that especially revealed things, or one round, or is there something that you can maybe highlight that you thought was just really, evocative for you?
Yes, and I alluded to it earlier. Now, you need to know that you're talking to a research data nut. So I do have a small problem in this regard. So asking me to choose it's not an easy thing for me.
Okay.
But one of the things, and this is something that anybody can do, you don't have to engage a firm to do this, is we literally did a visual audit mm-hmm. of what Ys were doing in their local markets in terms of their website, their collateral material.
That's
we looked at our own selves at the national office, at our collateral material, at the messages that we were putting out. We looked at the nature of the stories about YMCAs that were being picked up. That kind of audit one can do themselves. We had someone help us with it, but you could do that yourself. And that's where it became unbelievably clear to us about how fragmented an organization we were in terms of how we presented ourselves to the public.
I think that visual audit is like one of the most enlightening things that people can do, and it is so simple. We actually have a checklist that I used for people, and at the end of the podcast, I'll make sure that I give people a download link to go grab that checklist, because it's so helpful. And while it's simple and affordable, and you can easily do it yourself, it also, you're a large fragmented organization. How tactically did you gather and organize that?
You mean the audit itself?
Yeah, how did you actually look at everything?
Well, fortunately, we didn't do it ourselves. The agency that we engaged did, but But literally, we have gone out and looked at all of our Y's websites, or we will ask them to submit collateral material. So there are ways of doing it.
Okay. So then that's the next thing I want to talk to you about. You, like many other organizations, are a complex and multi-part organization. Some organizations have lots of individual programs that have their own individual branding. Some organizations are a national office with direct report chapters. You have a complex structure that can sometimes be difficult to say, this is exactly how we want you to do everything. Can you talk a little bit about how you're organized and how that then plays out through executing a rebranding?
Yeah, so we are what's called a federated organization. We have a federated structure, which means that every YMCA is a separately incorporated 501c3. So there is a very limited set of things that we can mandate. We are just not a command and control environment. And even the things, frankly, that we can mandate, we have a culture which says you don't tell people what to do, you engage them in the process. So when we made the decision to rebrand, we actually gave ourselves 2 years to do the strategy development. And the reason that we did that, Beth, was because we decided that we would engage what we call our Y's, the movement in every one of the major decisions that we made. They didn't necessarily all get a vote, but we shared the research. Every time, the way we structured it is we asked a question, we did research, we came up with an answer which suggested a strategy. We asked the next question, we did the research, we came up with the answer, suggested a strategy. So at each point where there was a major decision, we shared the question, the data, the strategic response with the Y's across the country. At the same time, and I would always counsel this, we had a group of YMCA CEO leaders who were a task force, and they were overseeing all of our work. And they became our advocates. And then throughout, we did road shows, so we traveled around the country. We did webinars constantly, so that while this was new, and there were certain things that were challenging for our movement to accept, all along the way, they understood the rationale.
That is really, I think that's so helpful for people to hear, that it can't just be we're going to bestow our wisdom upon the masses, that getting people involved is really critical. So I'll also ask you the flip side question. How did you manage that involvement? A lot of times people want to just weigh in and everybody has an opinion. It's so important to ask people's opinions, but sometimes if you ask people's opinions and then you don't use them or don't listen to them, they become more disenfranchised than if you'd asked them in the first place. Did you have specific roles and did you let people know in advance, how far the rope was that you were willing to give them? How did you manage that balance between involvement versus overwhelm?
So that's a really great question because we have a little phrase here. I'm sure you've heard it. The worst thing you can do is creative by committee.
Absolutely.
That is a recipe for disaster. So we had a board committee that we worked with, and their word, they were decision makers, yay or nay, and ultimately all of the big decisions were brought to our national board. So the sort of buck stops here decisions were made at the national board level. Then we had this CEO task force composed of YMCA CEOs, and they gave general reaction and general guidance. And really, they also had a significant weigh-in and what would I say, decision-making ability. the things that we brought out to the movement were much more much more like updates and just bringing them along the strategic process. And we did get opinions and sentiment, but we also were clear that in this we were going to go with the counsel of our experts and the board decision-making committee.
And I think that's a great way to do that, to kind of really structure. I kind of call it the working group, the decision makers, and the advisors. That every branding project needs those three different roles, and there needs to be that clarity around, we want to hear what you have to say, but we need to make decisions here, and here's what the decisions were, to be able to show people that you want them to be involved and to be updated. But otherwise it can just turn into, it either turns into chaos or the message gets watered down, or the worst of all, it just gets stuck.
Or it gets stuck. And here's another thing. This is going to sound funny, but I think I'll say it anyway. One of the things too was the larger advisory group of YMCA CEOs were just that. They were YMCA CEOs, as opposed to marketing people from different YMCAs. And the reason that that's an important thing to consider is because rebranding is about strategy as much as it is about marketing. I think even more so. And if that advisory committee is composed of, I don't even know how to say this the way that to be polite. It's like you'll get. I think you're going to get a more fragmented strategy, even though I believe that once defined, the marketers have a huge role in helping the organization understand what branding's about.
I think I don't think I've ever had anybody make that point before. And
yeah,
it's really
I'm
interesting.
afraid I shouldn't make it.
No, I'm really glad you did.
I'm a marketer.
Right, and so am I. But it's sort of like if you bring in just the marketing level, you're going to get marketing answers. If you bring in strategic thinking, you're going to get strategic answers. That's really interesting. It's true.
I think so, because I think brand is first about strategy.
Well, now let's talk a little bit about that, too, because another thing that I often hear from when we get called in to do a branding project is, we need to do rebranding, and the first thing I'll ask for is, can I see your strategic plan? What are your goals? What does the brand need to exist to support? And people will sometimes say to me, no, the brand's supposed to be answering those questions. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between organizational strategic planning and strategic branding?
So strategic branding, I think, is what I have defined as the process we use. So uncovering the essence of the organization, what it exists, almost like a mission statement, but not quite.
Right.
What does it exist? What is the promise we're making to people by virtue of our existence? What are the domains within which we keep that promise? So that to me is strategic branding. Strategy is about creating a vision for the future and a path to get there. Maybe you could say that the strategic branding helps put the guardrails on that strategy.
Oh, that's so funny, because one of the things I always say is that it helps people know where they can ride their tricycle between the fire hydrant and the driveway.
Okay, well, so it's the same articulation.
Exactly,
of what I just
it's
said.
definitely the same thing. A lot of times, I often will describe it as it helps you connect with why you do what you do, and sometimes mission statements can be very tactical. They can be very wordy. They can be very, created by committee. And they're often dense and not able to be changed and not able to be really understood by by people, or they don't help people rally around and get excited about taking action on what you do. It clarifies what you do. I mean, some of them are wonderful, but many of them, have 19 commas in it. And so moving forward with this branding, I mean, your brand, what you said, strengthen community, and I think it's important for people to hear. It took you, I mean, that's 2 years of work to get something that simple. It's
okay. Well, it didn't take 2 years.
Well, obviously, but 2 years of work to kind of pull. Yeah, exactly.
I'm teasing you.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, it didn't take you two years to come up with, but it's very much like that. It can take a very long time to distill a message down to really what's at its heart and at its core, and create something that is really exciting and memorable and important to the people that need to connect with you.
And I think for us, and again, this may be too much inside baseball, the most elegant thing that we did was reduce everything, every program, every activity to one of 3 areas of focus. So the youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility, because in our organization, there are hundreds upon hundreds of different programs that WISE offer around the country. And that makes it a very difficult story, actually, for someone to raise money against. It's just hard to know how to capture the organization. And so being able to put everything we do under one of these 3 pillars was huge. And it was actually one of the things that our boards around the country and volunteers liked the best, because it gave them an easy way or an easy frame from which to kind of describe the organization and then go into the more targeted discussion.
Right. I bet it also helps them make decisions. One of the things I find a lot about branding is it just reduces friction and lets people make faster decisions, because they know if it doesn't fit into this bucket, maybe it's not something we should be doing.
We actually created, and I can't remember what we called it, but one of those decision trees to help, because when we began, people had to decide where to stick their programs. So we created a decision tree to help them say, is it youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility? And you would think that would be easy, but it isn't necessarily. And some WISE then use that decision tree to say, wait a minute, this program doesn't fit under any one of these, and they would get out of those programs. Wow. So that's what I mean when I say it helps you figure out what's in mission and what's out.
So you're in a unique position for me to speak to, because you actually did this a number of years ago. And so you now have had some time and some experience to see how this is playing out, in your organization. And one of the big questions that I get a lot is, branding is a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort. Is it worth it? What are you seeing happening in your organization as a result of doing this?
So for us, and I'm biased, I think it's been transformational. I've said this before, you have to stop me, it's my soapbox, but it sets the true north. For us, it has made us more cohesive. So having a common logo, having the common areas of focuses, common articulation of our cause has moved us in the direction of working collaboratively more than we ever have before. So YMCAs across the country are doing more things together than they ever have, because there's more cohesion to what we do. So that's one profound change. A second, I think, really profound change is in the nomenclature area, instead of calling it a brand promise, that thing that's the essence of the organization, what we did is we decided to call our brand promise our cause. As soon as you call your brand promise your cause, you necessitate a change in behavior. So we have focused really hard in the last 5 years on adopting the behaviors of effective cause-driven organizations. So our competency model, our hiring, our job descriptions, all of them build on this notion of cause. That's pretty profound. And then the other thing that's happened is we have developed a strategic plan that articulates the movement's vision. So YMCAs collectively, their vision for what we want to achieve together in each of our areas of focus. We had never, ever done something like that before.
So now, what are you able to do and achieve because of those things? So you talked a little bit about now you can work collaboratively. So now that you can work collaboratively, what has been able to happen? What actual things are changing and that benefit the Y and the community because you can do that?
Okay, so one of the things that's very obvious or very sort of profound in the community is we have adopted a certain number of signature programs that we have very specific ways of implementing, and we're scaling them across the country. So we have a diabetes prevention program. We have programs designed to address elements of the achievement gap. We have a program around incenting our members to volunteer in their communities. So those are programs that are we're working on them together and implementing them locally. So that's one thing.
And that didn't happen before?
Not to this degree, no.
So now you're saying that multiple different Ys across the country can all get together and say, we think as an organization having a diabetes prevention program is a critical part of our vision. So we're going to work together to create the curriculum or program or whatever it is. And then you can then roll that out throughout all of the different Ys.
Could I nuance that a little bit?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm making sure I understand it.
Yeah, and I'm throwing a lot of stuff out there. We develop these at the national level.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Okay, but because Ys are thinking about what can we do collectively to make a difference in this country, then they're adopting those programs in their marketplaces.
I see.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it did. Now, in the past, did you create programs at the national level?
We provided guidance on programs at the national level and support for programs, but these are highly evidence-based programs, so they require a different level of commitment to fidelity than others.
And so now that you have this whole new structure, you're getting support and buy-in from the different constituents, from the different organizations throughout the country, and it sounds like excitement about participating in this.
Yes, and what the brand piece does is the brand doesn't say you're going to be able to do these kinds of programs, but the brand makes it clear why these programs are so important to our organization in terms of our ability to help strengthen community through youth development. So those achievement gap programs they're a very clear manifestation of how we can help nurture the potential of youth. Diabetes prevention program, a very clear manifestation of how we improve the nation's health and well-being, which are the descriptors of those areas of focus defined by the brand. And that's a little hard to describe without visually, but do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I definitely know.
Okay, good.
And I think that leads us, that kind of makes me squeeze into another little aspect that's come out of everything that you've said. A lot of times brand is talked a lot about and recognized from the marketing stuff. I call them maybe the visual hooks, the things that you see, the new logo, the new brochures, the new paint colors on the wall. But a lot of these things that you're saying are really creating this profound transformation seem to be about your culture and about how you're interacting with your community, and very much how you're interacting with each other, and how your different constituents see their role, not even just in the organization, but their role in affecting change on this cause.
I think that that's fair, and it's not as if the brand alone does it, but the brand it helped catalyze or affirm thinking that was going on, and I would say accelerate the change.
Fascinating. Have you done anything internally for the people within the organization to help, once this brand was launched, to create this culture? Have you done anything conscious, training or continuing webinars or things like that, or has it happened organically?
Yep. So several things. One of the things is we implemented something called Living Our Cause. Living Our Cause is a program to engage staff and volunteers and help them understand what's their role in bringing this thing to life. So it's about storytelling. It's about exercises. It's about conversation. It's one thing to say the organization does this, but what does Kate Coleman do to contribute to realizing that vision? Then that helps to tie into people's passion for why they originally took the job. So that's one big thing that we've done in this area.
Wow.
And the other thing I alluded to before is we really have changed our training and our definition of the competencies required for leadership, and talk about it in terms of what does a cause-driven leader need to do.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you've changed sort of kind of who you're looking for, and what values and what skills you need from the people that take on those roles within the organization.
We have evolved our thinking, yes. And so this language around cause-driven leadership that came from this definition of our brand promise being our cause. And that so that's not branding, but the branding triggered that whole set of activities and changes around what we believe are required for successful leadership.
Right. And I think this is a really important message to get out there as we continue these conversations around branding. One of the things that's starting to show up with people, and just I think it's how will have been just the previous week, we will have had an episode with Tina Lauber from the Dauphin County Library System, who's also 5 years into they're 5 years into their rebranding. They're not a national organization, but they are a regional organization, and at 5 years in, they're seeing some of these same things, that it's as much about getting the word out publicly as it is about creating this culture internally, that people feel that it's up to them to deliver this message, that they're part of the cause and part of the creation of this brand, and that without them, it doesn't exist.
Absolutely. Big part of it.
So what advice do you have for anyone that's listening that is either at the stage where they're thinking, geez, would branding really make a difference for my organization? Or we're thinking about this, or we've always thought that branding was going to be helpful. If someone was getting ready to take this on, and they're really looking for this profound change, this profound transformation that you've been able to create, what advice would you give them about where to get started?
So I think the first thing I would say to someone is get a very, very clear sense of the problem that you're trying to solve. Because it may be a branding problem, but it may not be. So to me, that's always the starting point. What's the problem you're trying to solve? What are the questions that you're trying to answer? That would be my starting point.
I think that's really great advice.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is also really interesting about what you did was you started out to answer those questions, but you also sounded like you were open to letting the answer change throughout the process.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. Throughout the process, we were open. And in fact, it was like a joke. I felt like every time I kept going back to the board and saying, okay, now we think we need to do this. You have to be receptive to what the data is telling you.
I think that's what I have to say. Usually that's the question I end on. But the fact that you mentioned your board, I think I just want to ask you one more question. What I have seen to be the single biggest driver in the success of a project like this is complete and total buy-in from the leadership of an organization. I'm curious if you found that to be true as well, and if so, how did that play out in your experience?
So I mean, it's absolutely critical. From the perspective of let me just kind of parse my answer. Within YMCA of the USA, our CEO was 100% behind this, and that was required because we did push the boundaries a little bit with what we were doing. And so his being an advocate and really the face of this with me was huge. The second piece I would say is the board, and because of the way we brought them along and their willingness to be courageous, we're over 160 years old. We have a lot of history. Mm-hmm. So, and haven't gone through that many logo changes, some. Their willingness to listen to the evidence and make decisions based on the evidence was profound.
And I think that that's a really important message for people to hear. It's very easy for boards and really any people to, make decisions based on their own personal gut or their past experiences or their feelings. I mean, it very much happens whenever it comes to looking at anything visual. I always tell people that I show them first rounds of logos in black and white because even color is emotional.
Yeah.
But to do the research and then to be willing to put preconceptions aside, it's really hard, especially when you've got people that are board members or leaders that have been with an organization for a really long time. Is there anything that you guys did specifically to set the stage to help them get there? Because it's not always easy for people to just walk in and say, great, we're doing a rebranding. What do you need from me?
We did, honestly, that audit that we did with the hundreds of logos and the pictures of websites, which were all about facts but nothing about impact.
Wow!
Yeah, it was the emotional power of those pictures was very significant. So that was the starting point for it. I do want to say one other thing. The fact that our CEO at that time was supportive and that this wasn't seen as a marketing thing, mm-hmm. but seen as something larger for the full organization, I think was very important as well.
That is huge. Kate, this has been fabulous. Such an interesting conversation. I know I learned some new things, and I so appreciate your sharing your knowledge and your experiences with both me and the nonprofit community. How can people get in touch with you if they should happen to have a question?
Okay, so I have a way they could get in touch with me, but nobody can make any value judgment. because I am the most pathetic is an understatement, personal brander in the world. They could go to my LinkedIn site, which is Coleman, Kate. So I don't even have the name in the right order. It's pathetic, no value judgment.
No one's judging. It's Shoemaker's Children. That's what it is.
That's I was going to say that, but I thought not. That's exactly what it is.
Agree. I cannot even tell you how desperately my company needs a web redesign right now, and we do this.
So maybe I could hire you for me.
Yeah, hey, there you go. So I will put links to Kate's LinkedIn profile onto onto the show notes page, and I will grab a few examples of some of the stuff that you've done, and have them there for people to see what the Y has done through their evolution. Thank you so much. I truly, truly appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for letting me speak with you.
Thank you for listening to Driving Participation. For more strategies to boost involvement in your organization, subscribe in iTunes and follow Beth Brodowski on Twitter. Driving Participation is a production of Iris Creative Group Incorporated. Communication builds community.